Welcome back to another video in this contest prep series. In today's video, I'll be discussing 4 different things. First, I'll discuss how to incorporate lower and higher calorie days during a cut or contest prep. Then I'll discuss how to track weigh-ins and make diet adjustments. Third, I'll discuss how I've planned my photo shoots and my mock peak weeks and why. And finally, as soon as this police car stops, I'll discuss my plans for the upcoming off-season. So first up, how do you incorporate lower/higher calorie days during a cut or contest prep? In general, the data on refeed days, diet breaks, etc. seems to follow the following pattern. Either having refeeds and diet breaks doesn't really hamper diet progress overall compared to having a consistent deficit to match for diet length. So for example, let's say you're comparing having a 700 calorie deficit daily to having 5 days of essentially 1,000 calorie deficit and 2 days at maintenance per week, and looking at how that impacts muscle mass retention, hunger, etc., etc. As a whole, the literature suggests that having those refeed days or higher calorie days and lower calorie days with diet length matched, it seems to be either the same for outcomes like muscle mass retention and hunger and stuff like that, or slightly better for the groups performing diet breaks or refeed days. And so, provided you can accommodate for it, because realistically, switching calorie intakes day to day does increase the complexity and burden on the client or athlete a little bit compared to just having the same food intake every day. If you can afford to do it on a practicality level, then I think having refeed days or diet breaks incorporated is likely at least not going to harm you and might provide a slight benefit. Now, the benefits you see in studies aren't super consistently replicated, and they sort of vary between studies. But at the very least, I don't think it's going to harm you, and it might be worth trying out if you can afford to do it in terms of practicality or complexity. In my case, the way I'm going to incorporate them, and have incorporated them in the past at the beginning of this contest prep, was on training days, I have more calories, and on non-training days, I have fewer calories. Now, when it comes to how many fewer calories you want to have, I think for those lower calorie days, for me that's non-training days, it's essentially as low as I can get away with while not being detrimentally hungry. So in my case, that's around 22 to 2,400 calories a day. Those calories come almost entirely from pretty satiating sources, so stuff like vegetables, lower calorie density carbs, fruits, lean meats, dairy, and so forth. And by having a bigger deficit on those days, again, police car, I don't know what's going on. By having a bigger deficit on those days, it allows me to have more calories on training days, which at least in theory would then enhance performance for those training days, lead to better stimulus on those training days, which would overall then lead to more muscle mass retention across the whole diet. At the very least, I find having higher and lower calorie days to be somewhat useful in breaking the monotony of a consistent deficit, and also typically I find on training days I am a bit hungrier. Even though I am busier, I'm also a bit hungrier, and so I find it useful to have a bit more calories on those days, even if only because having more carbs on training days makes training a bit more fun, as far as you don't feel like a hungry skeleton and don't get a pump at all. It feels a bit more engaging and fun, and you get a nicer pump. So that's how I incorporate my lower and higher calorie days. They're essentially just a modified refeed. So I have 5 higher calorie days where I have around 3,300 calories per day, and then I have 2 lower calorie days on Saturday and Sunday where I don't train currently, where I have around 2,400 calories, let's say, which averages out to probably around like 3,000 calories per day, which is a lot, but when you consider that I am around 95 kilograms, well, 94 right now, which is around 210 pounds, I think, when you consider my body weight and you consider that I'm doing at least 15,000 steps a day, it sort of adds up. But I do feel a bit fortunate compared to other competitors I've seen talk about their diet or calorie intakes, where they discuss having intakes as low as 1,700, and that is quite literally half of what I was having during most of my prep so far. So yeah, that's how I'm incorporating my lower and higher calorie days during a contest prep. And specifically the additional calories come from carbs on those days. So on training days, I'm having around 900 calories more from carbs only. So for me, that's brown rice and cereal right now, but it switches from stuff like white rice to sweet potatoes. It depends on how hungry I am, the diet phase, etc. But those additional calories come from carbs, and they help with maximizing performance, maximizing recovery from training, and thus enhancing muscle mass retention across the whole contest prep. Now that that's out of the way, I wanted to discuss how to track weigh-ins and make diet adjustments. So to get it out of the way quickly, tracking weigh-in should be pretty easy. Ideally, if nothing else is happening, weighing yourself every day is a good idea, and then taking averages of those weigh-ins, the last 7 weigh-ins ideally, or you could even do more, but I think 7 is a good start. I think taking averages of the last 7 weigh-ins is useful, because that reduces how much a single data point impacts your decision making. Let's say you were only weighing yourself on Sundays. The water weight fluctuation from, say, Saturday evening's dinner can then have a pretty large impact on Sunday's weigh-in. And then if you only base your decision making, for example, on whether or not to lower calories on that one weigh-in, you can easily make the wrong decision. Whereas if you take more frequent weigh-ins, say for example one every day in the morning under the same conditions, the impact of a couple of slip-ups per week, for example, let's say one day you have a bit more salt or a bit less salt, or you have higher weight of food because you have less calorie-dense food, or vice versa, all that stuff sort of washes out a little bit, and it allows you to make a much better and more informed decision regarding whether to increase or decrease calories. Now, for diet adjustments, typically I would make diet adjustments once a week it doesn't really matter on what day, as long as you make it on the same day every week. In my case, I do diet adjustments on Sunday for the upcoming week starting Monday, with my clients as with myself. And in fact, I've had to lower my own calories recently. So up until a few days ago, I was doing a consistent calorie intake. So as I discussed earlier in my prep, I played around with lower and higher calorie days. But currently, I have, for a long time now, not really used them again. But now that I need to lower calories, and I don't really feel like eating less on training days, what I've done is I've just removed around 900 calories, 1,000 calories from my non-training days, which then, when you combine that over a week, or average it across a week, results in around a 350 calorie increase in my deficit per day, which in theory should make me lose around an extra 300 grams a week or so, which is around, I want to say, 1.5 pounds per week. No, not 1.5 pounds, like 2/3 of a pound a week. So in my case, I've increased my deficit by simply having fewer calories on my non-training days and incorporating lower and higher calorie days into my contest prep again. So I'd say taking 7 weigh-ins per week, averaging those weigh-ins, taking an average of the past 7 days, for example, is a good idea, and then making diet adjustments once a week. The reason you don't want to make diet adjustments more frequently is because it's simply too small of a time frame, even with averages, to really be certain of any changes. Like if on Tuesday you decide, okay, it's been 2 days now and my weight hasn't dropped, and you drop calories, that can often just lead you to make really abrupt and premature changes to your intake, which then eventually can either make the diet unsustainable, just make it harder than it needs to be. And I think typically having a bit more patience when it comes to making those diet adjustments can pay off, especially when you know your maintenance pretty well, you know how many calories you need, And so just because you had a few off weigh-ins doesn't mean you now need to override or overhaul your whole diet in a matter of a few days. Your maintenance hasn't changed that much, and so if your calories were working for you a few days ago, it's unlikely that they're just going to stop working right now. And so I think making diet adjustments once a week is a good idea. Any less frequently than once a week, and you might just be wasting some time. Example, if you made diet adjustments once a month, you might fall out of that, for example, ideal weight loss rate range. So let's say you want to lose between 0.5% and 1% of body weight per week. If you only make diet adjustments once a month, you might run into a situation whereby you are, for the first week of that month, losing weight at 0.5% body weight per week. But then for the last 3 weeks, you're actually losing a bit more slowly. And so if you only make diet adjustments once a month, then that's just not sufficient to optimize rate of weight loss. And so I think once a week is a nice middle ground where it's not so frequent that you make unnecessary and premature adjustments, but it's also not so infrequent that you lose out on progress and waste time, essentially. So that's about it as far as that topic goes. Now next, I wanted to discuss my plans for photo shoots and mock peak weeks. So because my show is now happening in almost exactly 8 weeks, or 56 days, 57 days, I want to practice a peak week. Now, for natural athletes, there doesn't seem to be that much of a benefit to manipulating sodium and water intake a ton. The main thing for natural athletes on stage is going to be carb manipulation. Nevertheless, though, because you don't quite know how a peaking strategy is going to impact you specifically, it's always worth it to practice that peak week once at least before your actual show. And so in my case, I'm going to plan that mock peak week, so to speak, for my last deload week of the contest prep, which is taking place, I believe, 4 or 5 weeks out from my show, which is a good time point to do a mock peak week because you're quite lean and you can have a pretty good idea of how that peaking strategy is going to impact your physique at that body fat level, and B, because you're quite lean. That is a lot of police sirens today, and I'm not happy about it. Because you're quite lean, it's also useful because you can do a photo shoot, which, if you're dieting anyways for contest prep, you may as well make use of that conditioning that you don't often have, because, let's be honest, getting that lean is not comfortable, it's not easy, it takes time, and so you may as well get some pictures while you're at it, is my view. Then, in my case, my photo shoots are planned for the 3rd and 4th of October, which is approximately almost exactly 4 weeks out from my show. The reason I planned this for my deload week is threefold maybe. First reason is because it's a deload week, I was going to go to maintenance calories anyways, and so it's a good time point to do a peak week, because it won't throw off my cutting progress or my weight loss progress. The second reason is it allows me to also do the training component of a peak week, whereby you take a few extra off days, you do mostly pump sessions the days before, and so that also allows me to do it without it interfering with either my muscle mass retention if I was doing it in a deficit, or with my diet overall, essentially. And then the third reason is because I will be deloading, I'll also have more free time because I won't be training as consistently, and that means I can afford to travel around to do some photo shoots. Yeah, so my photo shoot's taking place on the 3rd and 4th of October, and I'm looking forward to them. It's my first time doing any sort of formal photo shoot, if you don't consider the pictures in the changing rooms in my gym or in the stretching area, what have you. So it's going to be interesting. I haven't really had high quality pictures taken of my physique before. Like, I've had some pictures taken with a decent camera before, but not really with any sort of professional setup or equipment. And so it'll be interesting to see, especially because it feels like with gym pictures and pictures I take myself, essentially, there's only so much detail you can capture because the lighting is never optimized, and so my upper body, for example, can often overshadow the lighting for my lower body, and so my lower body looks worse than it would with even lighting, let's say. and so I'm really curious to see what I look like with better lighting, with professional equipment, etc., especially when I'm 4 weeks out. I'm still a bit concerned about not being ready on time. If you've seen my Instagram posts, you probably think, okay, it seems like he's pretty ready. But honestly, I think a lot of people underestimate just how much conditioning, I hate the word conditioning, but I still keep using it, just how much leanness is beneficial and required to be at your best for bodybuilding. If you want to see an example of what really good conditioning looks like, again with the conditioning, you can search for Brian Whitaker. So Whitaker is spelled Whitacore. Brian Whitaker posing WMBF Worlds, and it's essentially just him going through a posing session, I think like a week out before a show, and there you can see what being really lean and contest ready looks like. And so when people now tell me, oh, you look pretty much ready for your show, you can step on stage now, I feel very unprepared. At least I feel like I could go a lot further and benefit from it. And so I definitely need those remaining 8 weeks to get into my best shape possible. And that's part of the reason I've decreased calories, because I think I still have quite a lot of fat to lose. On my Instagram pictures, you don't really see it as much. But my hamstrings and glutes, for example, still have a pretty fair amount of fat to lose. And then overall, my physique could just be leaner. I do have veins in most body parts now, but I could still be leaner overall. Like every body part still has some fat to lose. And so these last 8 weeks are going to be quite important in bringing a good package to the stage overall in terms of leanness. Finally, I wanted to briefly discuss my plans for the upcoming off-season. In becoming super hungry in the past few weeks, I've gotten increasingly excited for the off-season. Not only for regaining some weight and having some good food post-show, which I am looking forward to a lot, and I'll probably make some videos like 10,000 calorie challenges, 20,000 calorie challenges, that sort of thing. But besides that, also just having an off-season where food is less of a focus, and I can focus on building certain body parts that might be weak parts of my physique now. For now, my assessment of my physique hasn't really changed that much. I don't think my chest and arms are going to be as weak as I initially thought they would be on stage. I think they'll definitely be on the weaker side of things, but they also won't be glaringly weak compared to the rest of my physique. Nevertheless, if I had to pick a few body parts to specialize on, it'll definitely be my chest and arms for now. Potentially my calves as well, but mainly chest and arms. And so my plans for the off-season are to spend somewhere between 6 months and 5 years gaining muscle mass. I probably won't want to compete again anytime soon, unless like I randomly win the show or something and get invited to Worlds or what have you, which I doubt is going to happen. So in most circumstances, I probably won't want to compete at least for another year and a half. I kind of want to finish my PhD before I compete again. So I'll be spending somewhere between likely a year and 5 years in an off-season, staying reasonably lean, like probably not going much above 105, 110 kilograms long term. In the short term, more like 100, because I don't want to gain more body fat than is required, and I can comfortably maintain around 95 to 100 kilograms for me. So yeah, the aim is going to be spend a year to 5 years in an off-season, building size overall, but primarily in weaker areas, and then eventually, provided I enjoy competing, which I'm not sure about yet. I'm enjoying it, but I think I need the whole experience to really make a full judgment of it, and then decide whether or not I want to compete again. But yeah, provided I enjoy competing, I'll compete again within maybe 1 to 5 years, and after I finish my PhD, I should have a bit more bandwidth or leeway to dedicate to competing again. But yeah, that about wraps up this video. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a comment, like, subscribe, all the usual stuff. I'll be making I think like 7 more of these. I'll also make some more videos for show day and a few days before show day. But for now, if you enjoyed the video, please comment, like, subscribe, and I'll see you again in the next one.